This is a digital show of the Susquehanna Railroad slides that I took from 1962 on to about 1968 or 9, even into the early 70s. Can you still see what's going on the screen?
Yes, the
Yep.
steam engine's
Oh,
up
yeah,
now.
looks good.
All righty, good.
Yeah.
Now, obviously that's not my shot. That's at Granton Junction. That's east of Little Ferry. And that is at the old Erie Terminal. That's a passenger train with a stainless steel coach leaving the, I think it's a Bob Malinowski shot. New York City across the river there. And that's a shot by Jack Ramus, who was a photographer who shot a lot of Susquehanna and Erie stuff. Notice the old Erie Railroad coaches that the Susquehanna was using. Now, the Susquehanna's main terminal in the beginning was at Edgewater, New Jersey, on the Hudson River, opposite Manhattan. New York City's on the right, and it was reached by a tunnel under the Palisades. You can see where it's yellow on the map. And I went to Edgewater in 1971, and I got a crew switching there with an S2, number 202. It's nice to see non-graffitied boxcars. And you can see the houses up on the Palisades. Those are all $1 million houses today because of the view of Manhattan. And this was back in the days when we had clear skies and you actually got a sunny day. Now it's either raining or it's Canadian smoke. And this is just near at the tunnel portal in Edgewater. You can see they had quite a bit of business down there. Not a huge amount, but enough to make it having a daily crew. There's 206, different engine, different day. This was November 26, 1971. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I can. Yep.
No echoes?
No,
Sounds good, Tom.
Yeah, okay. So the answer is plug an iPhone into the screen of my computer, and I guess we're in business. Come on. The show runs automatically. The software that I use, which is called Photo Magico, you can set the time for each picture on the screen. They don't have to all be the same, which is nice. Here's the train heading into the Edgewater Tunnel. This is the East Portal. So when I review these shows, I sometimes go in and tweak the amount of time that any particular shot is on the screen. If it has a lot of detail in it, I leave it on longer. If it's just a roster shot like that, you don't need to stare at it for 30 minutes or 30 seconds. There's another shot of the tunnel. Susquehanna was known for minimal maintenance on their track, but you can see the rails are shiny. The rails are shiny, so it's not abandoned. And that's looking down.
Was that tunnel ventilated?
No, it was not. No.
So during steam days, it was pretty bad. Okay.
Yeah. And here was a passenger coach that they had at Edgewater. The track in the foreground looks like it's brand new, like they must have put a spur into a new customer. Now we move over to Little Ferry, which is where the engine terminal was. Today, the engine terminal is north of here at Ridgefield Park, which is just like a half a mile north of that drawbridge. And back in the 1960s, the deal was if you went to the engine terminal on a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, there was nobody around, so you wouldn't get thrown out. Not that they would throw you out, but we just didn't want to be thrown out. So you went there on a weekend, and usually you could take pictures and nobody bothered you. You could snoop around. In 1962, December 30th, we went to shoot the newly delivered GP-18s. They have 3 of them. They still exist, 1800, 1802, and 1804. And the Susquehanna had the unusual policy of assigning locomotive numbers with an even number if it had MU. So almost every engine on the roster had an even number. It wasn't to fake out people to make them think they had a big roster. It was for the MU. If you look around at some of these shots, you might see there's one shot I think I have of a switcher, 235 or 205, that obviously did not have MU. So they used these GP18s on the runs out to Sparta Junction and Green Pond Junction starting in 1962. That's the turntable at Little Ferry Engine Terminal. I believe that's still there. The turntable still exists. And as you can see, there was a safety track that actually went out over the water. That wasn't for loading barges or anything. That was just simply because if somebody overran the turntable, they wouldn't go into the river.
Do you know when that railroad quit steam?
Susquehanna?
Right.
Probably early 50s. I don't know the exact date. There's narrow gauge Susquehanna. That was simply for shop tracks for little carts that move parts around. And there's another view of the engine terminal. I still miss it. It was kind of a real dump, with drums, and the EPA would have flipped out if they ever saw that today. There's diesel oil all over the place, and you're walking through muck, buildings that are falling apart, but you loved it. Now there is when they repainted the GP18s, and also repainted an RS1 in the yellow and black scheme. In fact, there's two of them. That's in the later days of the Susquehanna, but they still had RS1s running around. Now there's 234 that didn't end well. Before the GP18s came, they ran lash ups of 4 or 5 RS1s out to Sparta Junction and even to Haynesburg Junction. Notice the open automobile carriers over on the right. That's on the New York Central, the West Shore. Susquehanna had a few boxcars. So
did they always have that logo?
Well, they had it from at least in the 60s anyway. What was interesting is that my friend Bill Chaplick, who I'm still friends with 63 years later, he was a big roster shooter. So anytime you went to an engine terminal, you had to get a picture of all the equipment, passenger cars, cabooses, snow plows, cranes, everything. And I'm glad we did, because a lot of people didn't bother with this stuff. They just ran in, maybe shot a shot or two of the locomotives, and then wanted to chase a train. Well, we chased also, but we did make the effort to get all sorts of equipment, like this tank car, which is totally unmarked. Because if you wanted to model the Susquehanna Railroad, the question is, well, what did they have? Did they have standard Northeast cabooses? Well, not really. You look at these. Now, notice that one has yellow lettering. That's in 1968. And they're not the standard, Atlas center cupola Northeast style caboose. They're a little different. The cupola is a little lower. Now there's one with white lettering. And these are pretty battered, but they used them. They were in service. So here's 1978. So if you're a modeler, you want to know, was there a number above the door on the end? Was there no number? How many windows were on the end? Were there none? 1, 2? Well, when you get these roster shots, now there's one with silver lettering. So again, if you're modeling and somebody has one with silver lettering and somebody says, oh, that's wrong, they never had silver. Well, there it is. So you wanted to get pictures of all the different varieties. Notice it had oil marker lamps on there too.
Was there any wooden equipment left when you were around there photographing?
Not cabooses or anything, or freight cars. Again, I guess they got rid of that stuff because the Susquehanna was, like most railroads in the era, was shrinking. They would just get rid of old stuff. They didn't need it. It wasn't like a business that was growing. And they said, well, we just need to keep everything. If you got something new, you got rid of something old. It was nice to see boxcars from various railroads back then. You had so many different railroads that when you saw a freight train, even the boxcars in the train were interesting, different color schemes, different logos on them. Now everything is just, privately owned, and like the freight car there has virtually no markings on it. I think that was a Susquehanna car. Here's another one with silver lettering. No, fortunately, they didn't have 100 cabooses, so I'm not going to bore you with 1,000 caboose shots here. There's a like 25 or 35 tonner that used to work the sea train, not sea land, sea train docks over in Edgewater. Now there's an engine with an odd number, so that didn't have MU capability. 203. Everything else has an even number, is MU equipped. But I'm glad we shot all this old stuff, because it's all beer cans and frying pans now. There's 205. There's another odd numbered engine. It's amazing that they even pulled their passenger trains with these S2s. They normally used the RS1s, but they did have some with S2s. They had 3 passenger trains a day. I don't have too many shots of them myself because they only ran on weekdays. And I was like a freshman in high school when I was taking these pictures. So obviously I couldn't get up there at 6:30 in the morning on a weekday and get shots. This was up in North Jersey.
How far west did the railroad reach? Is it western?
Well, it used to go to like Haynesburg Junction, where it connected with the Lehigh and New England. And then when the LNE quit in 1961, they cut it back to Sparta Junction, where it connected with the LNHR. And I did shoot that. That lasted until about 65 or 6, somewhere around there. And then they cut it back to Green Pond Junction, where it connected with the Jersey Central. And then they eventually cut it back to Butler. So it was a state of just constantly decaying railroad from Haynesburg Junction to Sparta Junction to Green Pond Junction, and then Butler. And then when Walter Rich took over in 1985, he reopened the whole line out to Sparta Junction, put in welded rail, connected with the LNHR so he could run his stack trains. So that's a whole different slideshow that I got to put together. Okay, so we've just about seen enough roster shots here. It's time to get out on the road. These were all taken in the early 1960s. So I hope you're not too bored with roster shots here. We'll try. I can't move this along any faster. It's all programmed.
It all looks good, Tom. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, again, they didn't have 100 engines. Okay, passenger cars. The passenger service lasted, I think, till 1966. And it was funny. They had the railroad was bankrupt, and they had a trustee named Irving Madman. Very appropriate name. Anyway, he had an advertisement in the local newspaper. It says, "I will pay you $2,000 to stop riding my trains," because he wanted to abandon service. But the state PUC wouldn't let him drop passenger service. So he tried to bribe the handful of commuters that used the train by offering each rider $2,000 to just go away. I mean, now notice the sign on the left there, Susquehanna Little Ferry Shops. I don't know if anybody ever noticed that, but the last passenger cars that they had were cast-offs from the Boston and Albany Railroad, ex-New York Central. Prior to those, they had actually stainless steel open window coaches. They were not air conditioned, but they were stainless steel, and they had 4 Bud RDCs, which went to the Jersey Central, as a matter of fact. All right, here's the bridge over Overpeck Creek. To the right is Ridgefield Park. That's where the current Susquehanna engine terminal is. So here's a couple of shots of trains drilling over the bridge. So Little Ferry Yard is, he's coming out of Little Ferry Yard. The New York Central Bridge is on the left. And there's 1976 when they painted up an RS1 for the bicentennial. And the only access to Little Ferry is you had to walk across this bridge. There was no road in there. So you couldn't drive your car in there and park. And the Jersey Central chapter NRHS had a visit to the Susquehanna shops at Little Ferry. when they had painted one of the RS ones for the bicentennial. So it had to be around 1976. And here's GP18 coming in. The drawbridge does not operate anymore. The bridge is still there. And now there is a road on the other side. It used to be double track. You can see the second track in the foreground. But now there's a truck road. Trucks can get in there to go to a transload. But most of the original engine terminal is torn out and gone. Now, if you look to the left there, that's where the current Susquehanna engine terminal is built, which is really just a diesel run-through track. There's no building there. Okay, so let's get on the road here. We've suffered through enough roster shots. So in our era, in the early 1960s, when we were photographing it, you went from Ridgefield Park or Little Ferry, as you can see in the map, to Sparta, which is on the upper left-hand side of that map, is Sparta. So like I said, we went as far as Sparta, then they cut it back to Green Pond Junction, which is around Charlottesburg, and then finally back to Butler. So there is Ridgefield Park. The track in the foreground is the New York Central, West Shore, Penn Central, Conrail, CSX, whatever it is this week. And the Susquehanna has a small yard here. As you can see, he's pulling cars out of it. That's where they currently begin and end their train. There's SU 99 and SU 100. The semaphore there is to protect the drawbridge over the Hackensack River. So seeing these semaphores is pretty amazing. I don't think these operated. There's no lenses in them, but they were so poor they couldn't even tear stuff down. Now they had something called the Lodi Branch, which was a weed-infested branch that served a number of customers in Lodi, New Jersey. It crossed Route 46 at grade. It went under Interstate 80, as you can see in this map, and it broke off the main line. You can see a crew here has dropped his caboose on the main line, and he's coming in. The branch itself, I shot it on a couple different occasions. It was to say it was seriously overgrown would be an understatement. And this is before the days when I had chainsaws and loppers and clippers and all that kind of stuff. So they ran with 5-man crews usually, or 4 or 5-man crews. So there was a lot of employees. They also were known for their barber pole style crossbucks. They had those black and white stripes. When you saw that, you knew it was a Susquehanna. There's a guy working hard, trying to sleep while holding on to the front of a RS1. There's some kids on a bike. You can see weed control was not a major object on the railroad. And here's the happy crew. The crews were generally friendly. You know, they weren't yelling at you to get off the railroad or anything like that. Here it is crossing the westbound lanes of US 46, which was kind of a challenge in the daytime because the road is fairly busy. That was in 1970. And there's the Modell's, another abandoned big box store. You can see they had quite a lot of business on the branch, though. It was more than just one car. And here is another ground level shot of crossing Route 46. Look at the train that they dragged down this branch. And of course, it's all abandoned now. Railroads have pretty much just thrown away any kind of local business. Everybody just wants, you know, stack trains and unit trains, which is kind of sad because there's still a market for carload freight. Well, here's another shot of the map here. As you can see, we're working our way west to Butler and Green Pond Junction and Sparta Junction over on the left. That's the Maywood Station, which has subsequently been restored. Here's a train coming along. It's a Wabash boxcar. A freshly painted caboose. And that's actually under Interstate 80 around Passaic Junction, which is where the Susquehanna went under. There's a Bud car that's a Susquehanna Bud car M1, which went to the Jersey Central. That's at Passaic Junction. Notice the semaphore in the background. And there's a great crossing. It's a great crossing. They're still there. That's where the line went under the Erie Railroad or Erie-Lackawanna Bergen County line. And there, the bridge in the background is the Erie-Lackawanna Bergen County line. That's still there. This track is still here. There's still a connection here between the Susquehanna and the Bergen County. Notice the Wilson refrigerator car. And clean up on the front of the engine. Another shot of a semaphore. That one looks like it was in service. And Paterson was the point where there was a branch line that went down into downtown Paterson that the RDCs ran on. The RDCs didn't run out to Butler. They ran from Susquehanna Transfer, which was Route 3, into downtown Paterson. And that quit earlier than the end of passenger service, which was in '66. They had already gone to the Jersey Central in the early 1960s. Okay, so west of Paterson, you had the Oakland Bridge, which is a big photographic railfan location. And then you had the Diamond at Pompton Junction. So this bridge is still here. It's still a good shot if you have a train in daylight. There's also locals that run on here besides the SU 99 and SU 100. The SU 100 comes down in the early morning, usually before dark, before sunrise. And the SU 99 goes west, usually around 4 o'clock in the afternoon out of Ridgefield Park. So you can get him on the bridge in daylight.
Is Pompton where the Pompton Turnpike gets its name? I suppose it is.
Probably, yeah. This is going out toward Pompton right here. And the junction there, the diamond is still there, amazingly, because you cross the old Erie Railroad Greenwood Lake Branch. And now there's a connecting track because the Susquehanna uses that connecting track and then goes over the diamond to go down to a customer that they haven't been able to get rid of south of there on the old Greenwood Lake. As I said, it was kind of a tight line to shoot. It was some parts of it were double track out to Paterson, and then it was single track most of the rest of the way. Notice the telephone booths. In some of these photos, it isn't just the train that's rare, because the 1800 still exists, but it's on East Penn Railroad now. There's a Union Carbide red and white Bakelite plastics hopper car right behind the engine. But sometimes the vehicles in the picture are just as interesting as the train. Come on. Okay, Butler is where the passenger service traditionally ended. Even in earlier days, that's where it was a commuter service. They ran 3 trains a day. We did drive out here one day on a weekend and shot the passenger trains parked. There was also a number of industrial customers here, so you could get switching activity.
That station goes back a ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's still there. It's part of the city museum complex. Over on the right was a rubber company that the railroad serviced. There was a number of sidings in there. And they had a passenger yard here, if you want to call 2 tracks a yard. And there were 2 trains there. I think the second one is an S2. Over on the right, the second engine is an S2. This is what they use for passenger power. The 2 of the trains had a single coach. You can tell it was a heavy duty line. And one of the trains had 2 coaches. And I actually got to ride one of the passenger trains once by actually walking. I took a Erie-Lackawanna train to Paterson, and I walked across town to the Susquehanna, which was about a mile, and then walked down the track like 2 or 3 miles. And I was a high school kid and got on the train and rode it a couple of stops back to Paterson, just so I could say that I rode the Susquehanna. I shot some movies out of the back of the coach, and they never charged me for a fare because I got on at a station where on a commuter train, people are just getting off at every stop. So the conductors don't bother to check tickets or collect tickets. So we climbed up on the train and just took a couple of shots. That's looking west. You see a semaphore there on the left, west toward Green Pond Junction. So we never got there to shoot these running. You couldn't really chase them anyway. The problem was New Jersey, traffic is just abysmal. And even at the slow speed and with multiple stops of a passenger train, the number of red lights and intersections and school zones and all that stuff, you couldn't chase. So it wasn't very cost effective to go up there and try and shoot the commuter trains because you'd get 3 shots. If you lived there, it might make more sense. You could just go to a different station every day. Well, here's switching the rubber plant in Butler. This is all torn down now, and it's all condos and, you know, typical Jersey development. But back in those days when we made things in this country, they switched boxcars and covered hoppers in there. Notice the steam engine water plug over on the right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Butler Station in the background. So these were good finds. You know, this was long after passenger service quit, probably in the later 60s. There's another shot of Butler Station. And there's that water plug on the left. I wonder whose basement that is in now. And here we go, switching in a boxcar. I'm really glad I took these human interest shots. It was funny too, in the old days when we were kids, we didn't want people in our shot. We just thought that was a distraction. It was like, oh man, there's a guy hanging on that car. But now you treasure those shots, even like kids on bicycles looking at the train or a motorist that stopped at the crossing. We used to think that was destroying your shot. It wasn't pristine, but now you look at it, you say, oh, look at that old Pontiac, you know. Now this place here is called Smith's Mills, still there. That bridge is still there. This is where the SU-99 and SU-100 run. This is west of Butler. Same place, looking the other way. There's still a grade crossing here. And of course, today I would have had my clippers out and that tree on the right would be gone, but
There's
you
a
know.
telltale there.
Yeah. And as you can see, the whole railroad was not manicured. The track is in much better shape now. It's all welded rail. It's all ballasted. The song here is "Run Through the Jungle" by Creedence Clearwater. And that's a bridge out by the Newark City Water Supply out by Charlottesville. They built a big reservoir out here. And in doing so, that's at Smoke Rise. That's where they had that legendary washout that they didn't want to bother to fix for a number of years. But remember Lever Brothers Company? Anyway, out here is the Charlottesville Reservoir. The road in the background is New Jersey Route 23. And when they built this reservoir, they flooded old Green Pond Junction, where the CNJ connected. See on the map there, where it says Wharton and Northern, that's the old CNJ. They flooded Green Pond Junction and made a new Green Pond Junction connection over on the left, which you'll see in the next map here. See where the purple line is over on the left there, the magenta colored line? That's the relayed track for CNJ to connect with the Susquehanna, which of course the CNJ is now abandoned with Conrail. But up until 1976, that's where they ran. So this is what they call new Green Pond Junction. Susquehanna train there going back to Little Ferry. And this is the CNJ over on the other side of the reservoir on the newly built alignment. And they ran a daily train 7 days a week. It ran out of Allentown. It was called AY2 and AY1. And it went up to Green Pond. And there's the reservoir that flooded out the old connection, which was over on the left side of this picture. So the Susquehanna track in the foreground is still there. Now, in '68, they had the Morris County Central running up there on the Susquehanna. And that ran from Newfoundland, New Jersey, not Pennsylvania, and it ran west to Oakland. It was about 6 miles. It was very popular and it was very scenic. And they had an animal car where you could ride outside in the fresh air. And the road in the foreground is New Jersey Route 23. So it was easy to chase because it was a 4-lane road. And obviously they didn't go very fast, but you can see they had pretty good ridership. But eventually the people running it, I guess the engine needed work, and you know, the classic story, they didn't have enough money to keep it running. So that engine today is in Whippany, New Jersey on display. So it's still preserved. And they had a little critter there to help with the runaround. You can see the barber pole Susquehanna crossbuck. And here's the main line west of Green Pond Junction going out to Sparta. Looks abandoned, but it's not. So in 1903 survey map there shows where the Susquehanna crossed the LNHR at Sparta Junction. And now today they've built a connection from the Susquehanna to the LNHR in the upper right-hand corner of the map there. Now the other track to the left is the old Lackawanna Franklin branch, which is now gone. Woodruff's Gap is now an overpass over the LNHR. So the Susquehanna connects with the LNHR right where it says Sparta Junction. There's a connection there.
A couple of maps ago, you had a railroad noted as Wharton and Northern. Does that still exist, or was that absorbed?
No, that was a subsidiary of the CNJ, and that existed till 76, that track. Okay, that's Sparta Station. That actually burned down, and they rebuilt it as a replica exactly the way it was. So it's owned by Mohawk Industries. And look at this old bridge. This is for modelers. They would flip over stuff like this because most rail fans never take pictures of infrastructure. They just want roster shots or action shots of locomotives. But if you wanted to model the Susquehanna and you wanted to build this bridge, it's like, did it have wooden timbers? Did it have metal supports? Was it stone? So you have a picture like that and it answers the question. And that's a water tower from the steam days at Sparta Station. Now, Sparta Station was about 2.5 miles from Sparta Junction, 2 separate places. And that's crossing Route 519. And there is a train at Sparta Junction. And at the time, in the mid-60s, they came out this far to here. Now, the crossing left to right is the LNHR. The track that you're looking down is east on the Susquehanna. There was an agent here, weekdays. And here is a Susquehanna train on the interchange track. You're looking north on the Lehigh and Hudson River toward Warwick, New York. And they had a fairly decent interchange business here. There were 2 interchange tracks here, and then there was another interchange track, I would call it east to south, from Susquehanna to the LNHR, and the train actually used the diamond. So it used the track on the right there, and the track in the distance where the freight cars are, that was the line that went out to Haynesburg Junction. And here you can see cars that are on the other interchange track on the right. So I guess they put loads on one track and empties on the other track. And here was one of their RS1s was sold to the Tennessee Railroad. So it's already lettered for Tennessee Railroad number 6. And then here was a day, July 11th, 1963. They were out here switching. There was like a sand pit here. This area here is all redeveloped, and it's still a big railroad customer. It's Suburban Propane. They get tank cars of propane in there. So there's a big tank car unloading facility. There's also a huge yard and sidings for U.S. sweeteners, which gets tank cars. So there's a lot of local business out here for the Susquehanna today. And they have a local that comes out from Little Ferry out to Sparta Junction. That's Walter Rich. He's the guy that took over in the 1980s and started the stack trains. So we'll have another show for you. I think that's the end. We'll have another show for you on the Susquehanna, rebirth of the Susquehanna.